Welcome to a deep dive into something pretty fascinating, I think. The link between Parkinson's disease and diet. We've got a video here from Parkinson's NSW. It's called Diet, Nutrition, and Parkinson's Disease. Ready to unlock some secrets?
Sounds great. This video is a good one, packed with helpful stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. So we're going to be looking at how the food choices we make each day can impact, not just our overall well-being, but also how effective our medications are and how we handle the symptoms of Parkinson's. It's like having like a secret weapon right there on your plate.
I like that. A secret weapon on your plate. It's true, we often don't realize how much power we have.
Okay, let's jump in. The video starts off by talking about, the good old balanced diet. You're probably thinking, okay, tell me something I haven't heard a million times. But here's the thing.
Right. It is common advice, but when we're talking Parkinson's, it becomes even more important. Like crucial. It's not just about, general health anymore. It's about really managing those symptoms and making sure your medications are working as well as they can.
Exactly, yeah. It's like setting a good foundation.
Yes. Right.
So the video, it goes on to talk about dealing with some of the common things that come with Parkinson's, like constipation. This is something that a lot of people with Parkinson's, they experience it, and it can be really tough. What is the video, what does it say about how to deal with this?
It's pretty straightforward. It recommends a high-fiber diet. So, lots of fresh fruits and veggies, whole grains, legumes, things like that. All those foods that are naturally packed with fiber. And of course, staying hydrated is really, really important, too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It recommends aiming for, 2 to 3 liters of fluids every day.
2 to 3 liters? Wow, that's a lot.
It might seem like a lot, but especially for people with Parkinson's, staying properly hydrated is super important.
Yeah.
The disease itself and some of the medications can actually make you dehydrated, and that can make things worse. Fatigue, confusion, even problems with balance.
Right. So that's something you really want to stay on top of.
Yep.
Speaking of medications, what about those interactions you mentioned earlier? The video specifically talked about levodopa.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty common medication for Parkinson's. So let's deal with that.
Well, the main thing to remember is that if you eat a meal that's high in protein, it can interfere with how well your body absorbs levodopa.
Oh.
So if you're taking this medication, you really got to be careful about when you eat your protein.
Oh, interesting. So it's almost like the protein is like blocking the way for the levodopa to get where it needs to go in the brain.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, the protein molecules kind of compete with the levodopa, and it ends up not being as effective. So the best thing to do is have your protein, several hours before or after you take your medication.
That's a really, really good tip. Now, let's move on to something else that I find really fascinating. The video mentions inflammation and how eating anti-inflammatory foods can be really important for brain health, which obviously is key when we're talking about Parkinson's. Did they mention any specific foods that are good for this?
Yeah, they did. One that really stood out was coconut oil.
Oh.
Yeah, they highlighted it as a really strong anti-inflammatory fat. You can use it in cooking, just like olive oil.
Coconut oil. Interesting. I usually think of it for, smoothies or desserts or something, not brain health.
It's actually pretty versatile, and it has some surprising benefits. And there are plenty of other anti-inflammatory foods out there, like oily fish, salmon, tuna, mackerel, and then you've got those dark leafy greens like kale and spinach.
Okay, so there are a lot of good options, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of delicious things that are good for your brain, we can't forget antioxidants. The video talks about how powerful those colorful fruits are. Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, packed with antioxidants.
Yes, I remember that. What about the green tea? 3 cups a day? Something about neuroprotective effect.
That's the one. Green tea has this compound called EGCG. It's a super strong anti-inflammatory and antioxidant.
3 cups a day, huh? I can try that. Okay, so moving on to something that you might not immediately connect with, diet, bone health. Why is this something that people with Parkinson's need to pay extra attention to?
That's a good question. People with Parkinson's, they're actually at a higher risk of having low bone mineral density, which makes them more likely to get fractures.
I see, yeah. So how can what we eat, how can that help?
Calcium is super important for strong bones. So things like dairy products, leafy greens, nuts, tofu, those are all great sources. And then, of course, there's vitamin D.
Right. Didn't the video mention something about getting 15 to 20 minutes of sunlight early in the morning or later in the evening for that vitamin D?
Yeah, they did. But of course, if you're concerned about your vitamin D levels, it's always best to talk to your doctor about maybe taking supplements.
Good point. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a lot about foods that you should be including in your diet. What about things that you might want to limit?
Yeah.
Is there like a foods to avoid list?
Well, I wouldn't say avoid entirely, but definitely be mindful of them. And it's kind of the usual suspects, those foods with tons of sugar, saturated fat, way too much salt. They're not doing your body any favors, especially when you're trying to manage Parkinson's.
Makes sense. That's probably a good advice for everyone, really.
It is.
Now what about alcohol? Did the video mention anything about that?
Yes, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol can interact with some of the medications used for Parkinson's.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So it's really, really important to talk to your doctor about that and understand the risks.
Definitely better to be safe than sorry. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here in this first part of our deep dive.
Hmm.
We've talked about, that good old balanced diet, managing constipation and dehydration, being aware of medication interactions, and really embracing those anti-inflammatory and antioxidant-rich foods. It's really clear that what you eat can have a huge impact on managing Parkinson's.
Absolutely. And the really amazing thing is you have a lot more control than you might think.
Yeah, it's true.
Every meal, every snack, it's a chance to make choices that can really make a difference.
Yeah, it's empowering to know that you can take control, right?
I agree.
And do something positive through something as simple as what you eat. But before we wrap up this first part, I think it would be helpful to, give a little bit of background about Parkinson's itself, what it is, how it affects the body. That way we can really understand why these dietary recommendations are so, so important.
That's a good idea. It's an important piece of the puzzle. So Parkinson's, it's a progressive neurological disorder. It affects movement. And it mainly happens when nerve cells in the brain, the ones that produce dopamine, which is a chemical messenger, those cells get damaged or die.
So dopamine is like a communication signal in the brain. And when those signals get messed up, that's when you start to see those movement problems that people usually associate with Parkinson's.
Exactly. And those movement problems, they can show up in a lot of different ways. Tremors, stiffness, slowness of movement, trouble with balance and coordination. But those are just the most obvious ones.
Right, yeah.
Parkinson's can also cause what we call non-motor symptoms. Things like problems with sleep, changes in mood, trouble thinking clearly, even problems with swallowing or talking.
Wow, it sounds like a lot to deal with.
It is, and that's why having tools like diet and lifestyle changes can be so powerful. It gives people a way to actively participate in managing their condition and maybe even improve their quality of life.
Yeah. It's amazing how something as basic as what we eat can have such a big impact on our health, especially when you're facing something like Parkinson's. It's almost like food becomes medicine.
It really is. And
Yeah.
that's a powerful thing to realize. It's not about some miracle cure, but it's about making choices. Choices that nourish your body and help it to heal.
Yeah.
And we'll keep exploring that in the next part of our deep dive. We'll be getting into some more specific food recommendations that can really help support people with Parkinson's. Welcome back to our deep dive into Parkinson's and diet.
So we've laid some groundwork here, right? We talked about how important that balanced diet is and how to handle like everyday stuff like constipation and dehydration. But now I really want to get into like, the actual foods that can make a difference.
Let's do it.
Where should we start?
Well, remember those anti-inflammatory allies we talked about?
Yeah.
Oily fish, those dark leafy greens, soil products. Those are all fantastic for like really supporting brain health.
Yeah.
And they might even, help slow down how Parkinson's progresses.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about those colorful fruits? The blueberries and raspberries and strawberries. They're like little antioxidant powerhouses.
Right. They are. And for a nice, like warm and comforting antioxidant boost, there's always that green tea we talked about. Try to aim for 3 cups a day if you can.
3 cups. Okay. I'm up for the challenge. I can do that. But changing gears a bit, what about bone health? We know that can be a concern for people with Parkinson's.
Definitely. That's where those calcium-rich foods come in. Things like dairy products, leafy greens, nuts, tofu, all excellent choices.
And then there's vitamin D too.
Yep.
We can't forget about vitamin D. Sunlight's a great source, but sometimes, supplements might be needed, especially if you're not getting outside much.
Exactly. And it's always a good idea to check in with your doctor, see what they recommend, what your individual needs are. Now, let's talk about the flip side. The stuff you might want to, cut back on a little.
Okay. So this is the foods to avoid list.
Not necessarily avoid completely, but, definitely things to be mindful of. We're talking about the usual suspects here, right? High sugar stuff, saturated fats, too much salt. Those things can make you feel tired, affect your mood, and they just make it harder for your body to deal with the challenges of Parkinson's.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, that's good advice for anyone, really, not just people with Parkinson's.
Exactly. And remember alcohol. We touched on that a bit earlier.
Yeah, it can mess with some of the medications.
Exactly. It's so important to have that conversation with your doctor, really understand what the risks might be. Better to be safe than sorry.
Totally. Okay, so we've gotten into a lot of specifics here. Can we just take a step back for a second and look at the big picture? What does all this mean for someone who's actually living with Parkinson's? What does it mean for them practically?
Well, it means you have more power than you think.
Yeah.
What you eat, it can be a really powerful tool for managing your symptoms, for just feeling healthier overall, and maybe even slowing down how fast the disease progresses.
It's almost like, it's not about looking for some magic cure.
Right.
It's about taking control, using food to help your brain and your body fight back.
That's exactly it. And, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
Mm-hmm.
Every little step you take toward a healthier diet, it all adds up. What really sticks with me from this video is that emphasis on finding what works for you.
Right.
And making changes that you can actually stick with, long term.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not like, some strict set of rules. It's about finding an approach that fits your life, that you enjoy.
That's it. And that's where having a good team behind you can really make a difference. Your doctor, a registered dietitian, other healthcare professionals, they can help you figure out what's going to work best for you.
Because everyone's experience with Parkinson's is different, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And their diet needs are going to be different too. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, just remember this. You are not alone. There are resources out there. There's support. And you have the power to make choices about your diet that can really make a difference. And this leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive. The video had some really good advice on how to fine-tune your diet, how to make it really work for you. I think you'll find it helpful.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive. We're on the final stretch now, looking at Parkinson's and diet. I mean, we've learned a lot about how powerful food can be, right?
We have, yeah. But, it's not just about knowing what to eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about figuring out how to actually use that knowledge, how to make it work for you. And that can be the tricky part.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to get overwhelmed with all this information. So where do we even start? How do we personalize our diet for Parkinson's?
Well, the video from Parkinson's NSW, they actually give some really good advice about this. They talk about how important it is to work with your healthcare team, especially a registered dietitian.
Okay.
They can, help you figure out what you specifically need, based on your symptoms, the medications you're taking, your overall health goals, all of that.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing?
No, not at all.
Yep.
For example, let's say you're having trouble with constipation. A dietitian can help you come up with a meal plan that have plenty of fiber, but it's also, food that you actually like to eat. Or let's say you're having trouble timing your protein with your levodopa. They can give you some strategies, make it easier to manage.
Right. That makes total sense. Having that expert guidance can really, take away some of the guesswork. Makes it less intimidating. So what other personalized advice did they have in the video?
Well, they talked about something called mindful eating.
Okay.
Which is basically, paying attention to how much you're eating and eating slowly.
Mm-hmm.
This can really help your digestion, and help your body absorb those nutrients.
Makes sense.
It's so easy to rush through meals nowadays, but slowing down, really savoring each bite can make a huge difference.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to manage those Parkinson's symptoms. It's almost like, bringing that mindfulness practice to eating.
Exactly. And remember, food is not just about fuel. It's also about enjoyment,
Right.
about connection, sharing meals with people you love, trying new recipes, exploring different cuisines. Those things can really bring joy to your life and, they support your well-being overall.
That's such a good reminder. It's not just about, calories and all that stuff. It's about nourishing your whole self.
It is. And for someone with Parkinson's, that sense of enjoyment and connection, that can be so important.
Okay, so as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from all of this?
I'd say it's this. You have the power to make a difference. By making smart choices about food, by working with your healthcare team to create a plan that's really tailored to you, you can manage those Parkinson's symptoms. You can really support your health and you can live a good life.
I love that message of like empowerment, you know? This deep dive it's been really eye-opening for me, and I hope it has been for you listening too. It's clear that food can be a really powerful ally in this journey.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the start. There's always more to learn when it comes to Parkinson's and diet.
So true. So keep those questions coming, keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, get in the kitchen and experiment. See what works for you. You might even find some new favorite foods along the way. All right. Until next time, happy eating.